Hello, everybody, and welcome to Enjoy the Journey. Today, we have somebody that is from Norway, a good friend of mine, Joachim, and he is going to be discussing food from the sea, or as I call it, seafood from hell. You'll find out soon. Well, hello, Joachim. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Javier from Hell in Norway. How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm here in the States. I'm in the colonies. What can I say? So, tell me a little bit about what you do as far as your specialty in life.
Yeah, I make sustainable food production at sea possible all over the world. So that's my specialty. My part of it, like professionally, is an engineer. So I design systems. So anyone that wants to put any type of food, it could also be energy production at sea. I can help them design systems to do that.
That's great. And so one of my friends said, "Oh, so he does hydroponics," and I says, "No, it's something completely different in the same world, but a different room entirely."
It's different than that because you could do fish production, you can do shellfish production, you can do kelp, seaweed, a lot of type of species, and it's the reason why it is sustainable is that you actually are producing it in the natural environment, so you're not using any energy to kind of heat up anything. So all energy that you put in goes to growth, and that's what makes it more sustainable than any other food production.
Now, if I remember correctly, you've set these systems up all over the world. You were in South America and North America, everywhere.
Yep, I've been to Chile, to Australia, Canada, both coasts, US actually too, and all over Europe. But it's been mostly in related to salmon production. So it's been fish, but also loads of shellfish and kelp farms, especially now with seaweed, because they are looking into seaweed to make a biofuel, not just for food, but also for fuel production.
So how does seaweed become biofuel?
It has what do you call it? It has energy, so you can, from the sugar energy in the seaweed, you can produce biofuel. So it's I don't know the biology, but you just you contract, no, not contract, you extract the raw material for, like, it's like oil production, but it's from kelp instead of, it's, you don't go through the whole old process of making oil. You do it chemically.
I got you.
Yeah.
And so it's an extraction process, like you said, like oil. And at that point, it's a biofuel that they burned or something. Yeah.
So it's been done for a couple of years, but it's never been big scale because it's you need huge facilities. So they're testing them, and what they're also testing is combining those with like food production. So you can have, because for industrialized food production, you will have a lot of nutritious. You can call it waste because it's the feces, but it's still nutritious. So that can be used as feeding for the kelp and the seaweed. So you can kind of do combined production at sites.
So it's like a self-propagating system that's basically recycling. So sort of the way some people in India feel about recycling themselves, where they're without getting into it too much. Probably a bad analogy.
Yeah, it's a bit different, but but same.
Let's move right on. So tell me a little bit about this. So when you go to these, how do people contact you're a consulting company, or
Well, it's several ways, because I've been in this industry probably for 20 years. So they know me because I started in 2000, and one of the first things I started doing was making mooring systems for fish farms.
nice,
And we started doing international because Norway has always been very much in front when it comes to systems for fish farms, like especially for salmon. So I started my international career like 2 weeks into my professional career. So it's been very good, and so they know me. And also any company that I've been working in, because I've been through a couple of companies based on how I wanted to develop myself by increasing my width of services and products. So they go through me or they will use the company, but mostly it's contacts that I built up. So it's a worldwide network, and it's although the world is big, the fish farming industry or aquaculture industry is not really that big, because you have a couple of huge exhibitions and fairs through the year. Not now with COVID, but normally, like every year, there is either one in the US, or it's in Chile, or it's in Australia, or in Norway, and you just meet everyone and you just get to know people.
what kind of okay, I'm putting you on the spot here with metrics.
Yeah.
What
Yep.
kind what 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 kind of uh I'm guessing it's a infinitesimal fraction, and might be wrong, but as far as the world food supply versus the segment that we're talking about with you, am I thinking tenths of a percent is correct at current production?
Yeah, probably. But it's that, first of all, we consume not much seafood. I would say a very small portion of the food we eat is actually seafood, and a growing part of that is aquaculture. But it's been fishing for a long time. The thing with fishing, it's you as we're approaching a huge number of people needing food, you've emptied out the sea, so it's not really sustainable. You can have areas where you can fish, but you won't, like, I think the if you look at cod, the average age of the cod has been going very much down because it was nearly extinct in like the end of the 60s. So uh, that's why sustainability is not into wild catch. So that's part of, if you go to a restaurant and you want fish, you should never search for wild catch, because that's not very sustainable. That's You're emptying a natural resource. So you should actually go with farmed fish. But that's I'm digressing. But when it comes to food production, we tend to like meat. That's the thing, because we want tasty protein, and we think that that's meat. But if you look at it, it's actually just as tasty with seafood. So if you go to China, you will probably see that the percentage of seafood being eaten is much higher, higher related to the meat. So it's just a matter of I would say habit, and not trying seafood, because seafood is amazing. And
Yeah,
I'm saying that, and I'm allergic to a lot of seafood, but I still eat it because I love it.
that's
So
great.
yeah, yeah,
Now, I had the um, title of the program was Seafood from Hell. And
yep,
there's a reason. And it really is, even though it's paradise, it's hell, right? Tell tell me,
yeah, yeah.
explain why what I just said.
Well, it's the place is called hell, so it's hell in Norway. But for me, it's paradise because I treat it as paradise. And if you go for the seafood, I was sharing some photos of eating the sardines in tomato, because Jeffrey Gitomer said that I had to show you the the sardines, which is it's, I wouldn't call it a delicatessen, but it's part of the food that we eat in Norway is actually sardines. So yeah, but
Yeah.
it's canned sardine in tomato sauce. But it's yeah,
I heard an interview with you before, and it kind of went like yes, I am from hell, and my wife is from hell, and my mother-in-law
Yeah,
is from hell.
yeah, the whole family is from hell. I actually did that. I was doing a presentation in Canada in 2008, and I was no, actually Australia. Sorry, in Australia, and I entered the conference in kind of the day before it started. So I arrived in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning. The conference started 9 o'clock, so I was a bit tired. When I'm a bit tired, my mind is a bit more open to what I'm saying. So I
Less
started, yeah,
filters.
yes, I'm from hell in Norway. So my whole family is from hell. My wife is from hell. My kids are from hell, and of course, my mother-in-law is from hell. And everyone was laughing. So like, yes, that was a good opening.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So,
And
yeah.
okay, so um, is there much of this farming that's going on in Scandinavia, or is it
It's a
where is
lot
it?
in Norway. It's big in Norway. Salmon farming is big in Norway. But actually, aquaculture, the biggest country is of course China because they have farming of carp. Like
Yeah,
every in as long as they have a lake or something, there will be farming of carp in China. So that's the biggest. But it's also a lot with shellfish and mussels, oysters. Like in if you go to New Zealand, you will see huge long lines of mussel farms,
yeah,
and it's not. But salmon farming is big in Norway, and aquaculture and fisheries is actually our second export next to oil and gas.
nice.
So yeah, but we also have a very long coastline, but we also have all the fjords. So we have a lot of protected areas. So it's fairly easy to do it. If you compare to the US, you have hardly any good places to do it because there is no protection. so it's different. But yeah, no, it's big in Norway, especially for salmon.
So one of the things that came to my mind is how I'm sure there's some ways that you protect what the harvest is from like mercury and things like that, contaminants in the water.
Yeah, but that's the benefit also in Norway is that it's very little contamination. So, and if there had been contamination, you couldn't use it for human consumption. So
Right.
it's a lot of restrictions, and that's one of the critique of salmon farming has been the use of antibiotics
Yes.
because in the 80s, like 40 years ago, there was no vaccines. So the only way to kind of make the salmon withstand diseases was with antibiotics. But by the end of the 80s, there is no antibiotics because vaccines were developed. That's what the company I'm working for now, they're big in vaccines. And so we vaccinate the fish when it's before it goes into the sea. And there is hardly, if you look at the use of antibiotics now in Norway, you're probably down to, I would say, 10 to 20 kilos a year. And the production of salmon, I think it's approaching 2,000 tons or so. It's tremendous. So the use of antibiotics, it's minute, it's nothing. But still, that critique is is remaining because that was the issue in the 80s. But it's a bad reputation is very hard to lose. So that's one of the challenges. Yeah. But
So
it's not if it's like sorry to but if you look at blue shell, what would that be in English? I'm not sure, but it's in along the coast in Norway you can't eat some of the shellfish after a certain period of the year because it's not because of contamination, but it's just the algae types that it gets into it makes the shellfish poisonous. But it's everything is controlled, so it's a huge just government body controlling just to get that correct. And I can assure you, if it had been contaminated, we would never sell anything to Japan. And Japan is one of the biggest markets for salmon. So that would be be the case with if it had been
well,
contaminated. So yeah,
with the Pacific Rim pollution, I imagine that, they'll pay a little more to get it from further away because the Pacific, the levels of everything with the the Japanese Chernobyl. I forget the name of that, but
Yeah,
there's all sorts of mutations there all along the coast
yeah,
in northwest America.
yeah. That's and the biggest challenge would be for different types of or different species of fish. So you have there is if you go into halibut, which is a type of fish which gets very old, and if you wild catch halibut also in Norway, you will find levels. I think that's of mercury because it's too high because it's like 75 years old. So over the time, it has consumed too much. So that fish, wild catch, we don't eat. But fortunately, we have farmed halibut, which is a tremendously good fish. It's extremely good, and that's like clean. And I think that might also be the case in the US if you, because especially I think it's very fat fish, which has more of the mercury in it. Like you can find it in tuna, so tuna and also in halibut, but in salmon, because you have a lot of salmon farms on the west coast of Canada, and there is no contamination there because that all goes to human consumption. So that's not an issue.
Great, great.
Yeah.
I was thinking back to your comment about cod, and I didn't realize that as a young lad, I grew up in New England, and grandma made me when I did not like going to I loved my grandmother, but I didn't like going there because the old housewife's tale of cod liver oil.
Yeah.
So that comment of yours probably would have cheered me on. Of course, we
Yeah.
all kind of cod and stuff like that consumption in New England.
Yeah.
But what the cost of the halibut, the farmed versus the
Yep.
wild catch? It's at a parity, or they're not wild catching anymore and they're just going towards a farm scenario, or
Well, they do wild catch, but it's not big because you first of all it's not the more I don't think it's a huge it's not it doesn't go in crowds, so it's not very it's not very efficient to fish it. You can fish it on long lines, but it's time consuming, and I'm not sure about the market prices, but I know that for farmed it's different because it's very big for restaurants because it's a very the consist that's the benefit of a halibut is the consistency of the meat.
yeah,
So it's a very if you like normal meat, it's the consistency is quite similar. It's not very different, and it's not actually also not very fish tasty. It's more of eating meat. So it's a very popular fish to do in restaurants because you can make extraordinary dishes with it because you don't have that same challenge with the fish taste sometimes because fish taste it's acquired taste, but it's good when you make special dishes, but you can't make everything with it. So but I mean it's for me I make a lot of fish dishes, and I use cod and I use salmon. If you want to bake salmon in the oven, it takes you 8 minutes,
yeah.
and it will be perfect. It's impossible to do it wrong. If you want to do meat, well, I have a challenge with that. It's you have to be at the right moment and at the right time. So it's yeah. So
So
it's just yeah.
good. These things kind of. I guess I've got a delayed reaction from the transatlantic discussion here, but I'm thinking about wild catching and overfishing and all that stuff. Of course, the Chinese fleet is the biggest fishing fleet in the world, and they're everywhere. But there's other countries also that are over. It's an
Yeah, it's not just the
unrestricted.
Chinese, it's the Japanese, and you will probably see Norwegian and Icelandic because it's big money,
Yes,
and the challenge is the intensity. It's the I mean, if you just go fishing by yourself, you catch 3 or 4 fishes at a time.
right.
And the challenge with a industrial trawler is that you take everything. So
Right.
It's not sustainable, and that's the challenge because it's very hard to control what other species of fish that you actually catch. And yeah, you can say you can let them go afterwards, but they've been stressed, so it's not a very I don't really like it. It's getting too intensified. That's a challenge, and you need to do it intensified because it's no money in it in any other way. So
So we'll see a
yeah.
lot. We'll see a lot of what we're talking about increasing with
Mm.
the focused bio industrial world.
Yeah,
With
and it's yeah.
So you were ahead of your time, man.
No, it's. I mean, I started working on fish farms when I was like 8 years old because my father used to own a fish farming company. So for me, it's I'm brainwashed into this. So, but also I grew up by the sea. So for me, seafood was kind of that was the diet. So
It,
yeah,
it was a hell of a childhood, wasn't it?
yeah. Actually, it was yeah. No, it was good. I didn't grow up in hell. That's the thing. I moved to hell voluntarily.
I
So
when we became friends several months ago, I looked on, I Googled it like anybody else would. And where you live is beautiful. I mean, it's like a little, um, it's an inlet and the
yeah,
mountains are on the sides. And
yep.
I mean, it's just what Norway, when I went, I was more in the south part, which was
Okay.
also lovely. I liked all the
Yep.
underground utilities and everything was clean and stuff.
Yeah.
Went to Malmo and
Okay. Yep.
yeah, I mean that's more the yuppified side of Norway.
Yep.
Very
Malmo is actually that's in Sweden, so that's
Sweden, yeah.
just
But
yeah, yeah.
I went, excuse me, and I went there and
Yep.
Oslo. Oslo was
Yep.
beautiful.
Yeah, Oslo is very different. It's nice, but it's completely different. So it's just because that's the only I wouldn't call it even a big city, but that's the capital. But it's the biggest city, but still it's small for you guys. It will be small. But for us, like me living in hell, where you have well in their area, we had probably 2,000 people, and then you have the closest town which has about 20,000 people. So it's rural. It's nothing, no density. You can have space for yourself. So for me, when I go to Oslo, it's like I hate it. I don't really like it. Although it's a nice city, but it's just different. And it's yeah, just
I,
different.
I visited the manufacturing there because at that point I was addicted to Volvos, and
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
I grew up involved with Volvos and Saabs because upstate New York and the
yeah.
snow belt type stuff. Those cars are great. We're great for
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
But
Especially the Saabs, I would say. Yeah, and Volvo is very popular in Norway.
yeah,
It is. Yeah,
and of course they're Swedish, but
yep,
um, it just it amazed me the you've got a lot to be proud of in Scandinavia because the manufacturing approach is very even back then before all this ecology stuff
yep,
was big, always safety and was always a factor. I mean Volvo had the
yeah,
first seat belts in 57
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah, and Saab was also very focused on being collision safe. So they made a test because a lot of there's a big challenge in wintertime with moose crossing the road because it's dark, so you don't see it, and it's big. And if you
right,
crash into a moose, you will have a big problem.
yeah.
And Saab actually made, and they proved it. They made their Saab moose proof. So you
Oh
you
my.
could you could hit the moose, and you knew that you wouldn't get damaged inside the car. So
Well,
that was the end of the 80s. That was a big issue.
in the
That,
70s,
yeah.
now I'm starting to show my age, like it's not apparent looking in at me. But they had this ad with Volvos stacked up
Mm,
15 on each other because they had a crush proof superstructure.
yeah.
So you could stack them up like a pallets. And
Yeah.
Fortunately, I never got into any accidents, although it was, anyway, we won't get into my hijinks in my youth, but
Yeah,
just very, very safe,
yeah,
reliable, great, you know, great.
yeah. And it's been always the focus. It's always been on safety, and it's never been a cheap car, but people buy it because it's a safe car. So that's the thing.
You get what
Yeah,
you pay for.
yeah, yeah.
And so when you are looking out in the world today, in the with the pedigree that you have as a,
Mhm.
can I call you a marine biologist?
Well, it's a marine engineer, but yeah,
Marine
yeah,
engineer,
yeah,
marine
yep.
engineering. Um, where do you see who is going to be doing this more other than everybody? Which countries do you see uh, bringing it to the forefront? Because obviously we have to do something.
Yeah, no, it's especially in Asia, I would say. We had before the COVID, we had big interest from India and also South Korea, Malaysia. I had a big opportunity in one of the big lakes it was in Indonesia, but they closed down because of the COVID, of course. But it's it's also because there's a fish species called tilapia, which is a very good fish to farm because it eats everything. If you look at salmon, that's a predator, so it's a high maintenance kind of fish because it needs specific food. Tilapia eats anything. It's vegetarian, so it can eat your waste, your garbage. Uh, it's completely tasteless, so you need a good sauce to eat it. But it's a big source for protein, and for Asia, that's huge because they have warmer water, so you need to have a fish that can take that. I would love to see the US going into not fish necessarily, but into seafood and kelp because it's needed. US needs something to develop on their coastal areas because it's beneficial for people. I mean, you have work and it's actually quite clean, so it's a matter of opinion, and it's wrong opinions because they don't have the facts. But I think US could be big in this, in my opinion, because you can put those systems in very exposed areas, and it
Well,
doesn't influence, it doesn't kind of pollute or anything. It cleans the sea, so it would be good.
and they use it for meat substitutes and stuff like that in hamburger and for
Yes,
kelp and things like that. And
yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's an
and you
awful
can
lot
use
of
it,
beef.
and it's also good because now when you make a lot of food both for cattle and swine, also for growing them, you use a lot of soy meal.
Yes.
You could use kelp or seaweed meal instead, so you can make other food production more sustainable by using seaweed and kelp as raw materials. So I think it's a huge benefit, and I try to tell anyone that I meet what I'm doing, but it's I don't know. It tends to be a very one-sided discussion because everyone is against it. But I just try to spread the message that wild catch is actually worse than farm seafood. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm thinking probably the way the United States agricultural business is structured are with the big um, letter DKM or whatever. Anyway, the
yeah,
there's all these subsidies that they've gotten over the years, the soy
yep,
and all, and so basically they're getting paid not to do certain things. So there's,
yeah,
it's sad because there's motivations not to be ecologically
yeah,
balanced.
yeah. It's and I think, and it's the same. It's the same in Norway, and that is we always think that if we start to look into being sustainable and working with the environment, we tend to think that we have to go backwards. But actually, there are huge possibilities. It's just that you need to change the mindset and start learning about possibilities instead of finding limitations, because there are limitations with anything, but you just need to be open-minded. And it's like, if you look at Tesla, the most sold car in Norway is almost Tesla now, because there is no tax on electrical cars in Norway. So everyone wants to buy a Tesla because it's a cheap car. But in addition, they have a huge network of chargers. So if you buy a Tesla, I can start in Oslo and go all the way up to north of Norway, and my car can plan my trip, and it knows exactly, okay, you have to stop 15 minutes there, you have to stop 25 minutes there, and it plans, and yeah, I know I'm charged. And it's the whole, and that's I think that's because the government decided this, we're going to look into this, we're going to do this, and it's been achieved. Of course, no one buys a diesel car anymore, and it's
No,
crazy. It's actually quite
there's
crazy.
yeah,
It's been like that.
yeah. And actually, Toyota last month just came out with something where they've got sort of a solid state version of a battery where they're getting away from, lithium is not a good way to do things. And so they've got a solid state battery, and it recharges from dead zero to some factor like 85, 90% in 15 minutes.
Yeah,
so
that's really good.
Those lengthy stops that you have.
Yeah.
When our friend Jeffrey Gittimer goes to Hilton Head, to his palatial place on the beach there, he's got to stop in the middle.
Yeah.
And have a 2 hours at Cracker Barrel. I know they probably don't have Cracker Barrels in Norway, but it's a pancake place.
Yeah, we went, my colleague and me, when we went up to northern Norway last week, we had a Tesla 3.
Yes.
And it was minus 29 degrees Celsius.
Wow.
And we could drive, that's probably about 8 hours, 500, nearly 600 kilometers. And we did 2 stops. And both of those stops were like half an hour, because they have superchargers here in Norway. So it's for half an hour, you go from 0 to 80 in the new Tesla.
Yeah.
It's the last 20% is a long time, but you don't need that, because you have all these superchargers. It's a huge network for Tesla in Norway, so it's amazing. And it's I had my doubts, because it's like minus 20 degrees. It's of course the heater didn't work, so we had minus 9 degrees inside the car, but that's another story. But no, I was impressed. So yeah.
Well, geez, we covered just about everything from soup to nuts. We went from paradise to hell and came back again.
Came back again. That's not bad.
Thank you so much for sharing with my audience. There's a lot of us that are interested in sustainability.
Yep.
And certainly what you're talking about is one of the keystones, nutrition. Not only what we consume, but what things consume that we consume, the intermediates.
Yep.
And this certainly is a field that I'm glad there's people like you that are out there advancing the cause. And after COVID, I hope you get your nice plum back in Indonesia. And I'm sure it's on hold, like all of my photo projects with corporate are on hold. And they're just waiting till this thing blows over, whatever that means. And
we'll see.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch up with you in just a little bit here. Well, everybody, what did you think about that? Your comments would be appreciated. The thing that amazed me most about Joachim and what they do is it's such a common sense thing that we're not commonly using, but apparently it's taking hold here in North America. I really appreciate his time. I appreciate your time. We're going through this journey together, and please leave comments, subscribe, let people know. We've got some really interesting people coming up on different topics. As you can tell, I bounce around a lot, but I try to keep everything interesting and stuff that a lot of people aren't covering. I don't know if that's good or bad, but it's me if you know me. Anyway, thank you so much. And once again, look forward to seeing you next time. Enjoy the journey. Please subscribe.